Science keeps us guessing on this one as it continues to study harmful foods for the pancreas. So we need to think a bit further and look at the triggers of pancreatic diseases to draw conclusions about harmful foods for the pancreas, which undoubtedly exist. Welcome to this video where we will closely examine this connection. Pancreatic diseases can have many different triggers, not just foods, but also medications such as chemotherapeutic agents, estrogens, opiates, or viruses. We think of the Coxsackie virus, hepatitis virus, herpes viruses, or a high calcium level in the blood in a condition called hypercalcemia, when something is wrong with the parathyroid gland. However, let's direct our attention to the triggers that hold significant relevance. These triggers exhibit unmistakable and precise links to our dietary choices. Let's take a quick glance at pancreatic ailments and their manifestations. Starting with a healthy pancreas, we encounter pseudocysts, which are relatively minor, followed by more severe conditions like cancer, acute inflammations, or chronic inflammation. This is the crux of the matter. Our goal is to shield the pancreas from inflammation by adopting healthy eating habits, whether it be in the short term or over a prolonged period. And in this context, we need to talk about gallstones because gallstones are likely the main trigger for pancreatic disease, accounting for 30 to 50% of acute pancreatitis cases. Gallstones are involved here. If we take a look, you can see the common bile duct from the gallbladder. This is the green duct where the gallbladder releases its secretion into the small intestine. And the other duct, that's the one from the pancreas, the yellowish one. And here we have a blockage caused by gallstones. Gallstones, which form in the gallbladder, have the potential to travel through the bile duct and obstruct this common duct. Such obstruction can lead to a backup in the pancreas, establishing a clear link between gallstones and pancreatic issues. In the upcoming discussion, we will delve into specific foods that may trigger gallstones. Before that, it's important to highlight two additional factors that can cause pancreatic disturbances. One significant factor is an elevated triglyceride level, where the glycerol molecule is bound to 3 fatty acids. Basically, that's the classic blood lipid level, which you can sometimes see visually when you draw blood. If a person has too many blood fats, you can actually see the fats floating on top in the test tube. Another issue is diabetes mellitus and the sugar disease. This is also responsible for many people having problems with their pancreas. So let's get started with the foods that harm the pancreas. And we'll begin with a very important and significant one in this regard, which is alcohol. And alcohol abuse is responsible for 30 to 50% of acute pancreatitis cases. That's what the guidelines for treating pancreatic diseases state. The question, of course, is what constitutes alcohol abuse? Is it my daily glass of wine? So I want to briefly address this. Alcohol abuse is characterized by, first, a strong craving for alcohol. Second, developing a tolerance, meaning you need larger amounts, and drinking is enjoyable despite knowing the harm it causes, yet you continue to drink. Another sign is when you have trouble starting or stopping, when you basically can't stop drinking and also with the amount, or if you have physical withdrawal symptoms, primarily shaking. And when you simply neglect other interests in favor of alcohol. For example, if you used to be active in sports and sports were really important to you, but now the club life is sacred because you meet with your club friends 2 or 3 times a week for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 beers. Such things already indicate alcohol abuse. And the big question is how much alcohol is healthy, how much alcohol is allowed. And here again, there are newer voices, newer data saying no alcohol at all is best because alcohol can ultimately be cancer promoting. And the major medical societies are now moving away from the idea of a daily permissible glass of wine. They are now advocating for as little alcohol as possible, ideally none at all, especially not on a regular basis. The question is, how does alcohol damage the pancreas and, of course, the liver? The answer is, it is directly toxic. Substances are produced that can harm the organs. Additionally, there are changes in enzymes leading to functional and metabolic changes in the organs. And then alcohol can even promote these blockages in the duct, just as I showed earlier. Let's stick with the topic of gallstones. Diet plays an absolutely crucial role here. As I mentioned at the beginning, alcohol is a major factor, but gallstones are also a very, very significant factor. And how do these gallstones form? They form from too much cholesterol. And in relation to foods, we need to ask ourselves which foods, for example, raise our cholesterol levels. But there are also many other factors. And one food that harms the gallbladder or promotes gallstones is simply animal fats. Butter, clarified butter, goose fat, lots of bacon, high-fat dairy products, cheese, cream, and so on. And even fish oil. So if you take fish oil, please don't overdo it with the fish oil. It's not necessarily actually required to consume double, triple, or quadruple amounts of omega fatty acids through fish oil. A normal amount, as indicated by the manufacturers, is sufficient. The fats contained in meat and sausages are a big problem for the gallbladder, and they can actually be responsible for producing these cholesterol gallstones. These saturated fats, the ones found in sausages and meat, can then contribute to the gallbladder not being able to empty completely. So this secretion stays inside, this gallbladder secretion, and over time it can thicken. You often see it on an ultrasound. It's called sludge in English. It's like a real sludge. Not only the fat content in foods triggers gallstone disease, but also the cholesterol content. And here we need to think about meat and sausages as they contain a lot of cholesterol and saturated fats. These fats are responsible for the gallbladder not being able to empty properly. The fats can prevent this, causing the bile duct secretion to thicken. In medical terms, this is called sludge, or you could translate it as mud. We see this on ultrasound. Essentially, it's a bile duct secretion that is no longer fluid and free-flowing, but has thickened to a pudding-like consistency. This creates the perfect condition for gallstones to form. The secretion doesn't flow properly anymore, and then these gallstones can gradually crystallize. And basically, you can imagine that a gallstone never grows overnight. It takes quite some time for it to gradually get bigger, and then maybe pass through the bile ducts or even block them. And then you end up in the hospital with flashing lights. Speaking of meat, many people don't know that processed meats have been classified in group 1A for their carcinogenic properties, the same group as nicotine. Also, you shouldn't consume hot drinks over 65 degrees. They are also considered carcinogenic and highly suspect. In group 1B, red meat, including beef, pork, lamb, goat meat, and even hot made tea, is classified. It's always the dose that makes the poison, and the amount makes the poison. And you should consume 500 to 600 grams of meat and sausages per week at most. When I think of some Bavarian snacks at the fire department, it's like the amount 1 or 2 people might devour. So it's not much when you break it down over the whole week. And let's stick with the topic of gallstones a bit longer, because simple carbohydrates and especially sugar contribute to the formation of more gallstones. Sugar is probably one of the worst foods for the pancreas, because the pancreas has to do a lot of hormonal work here. But simple carbohydrates, including sugar, do something else. They naturally raise insulin levels. Insulin is the molecule that essentially unlocks cells so that sugar can enter again. However, what many people don't know is that there are metabolic connections where high insulin levels can actually lead to high cholesterol levels, and this connection simply exists. That's why too much sugar, too many carbohydrates, too much pizza, pasta, and joy from bakeries and pastry shops can essentially raise cholesterol levels. And when there's too much cholesterol, it becomes crystalline and precipitates, leading to stones. How can you prevent gallstones? First, drink plenty of water and, of course, consume less sugar and fewer simple carbohydrates. That's a no-brainer. But there's also a secret weapon, apple cider vinegar. I'm a huge fan of apple cider vinegar, as you probably know from my other videos. Apple cider vinegar can actually help prevent too many gallstones from forming because it promotes good bile flow through its stimulating effect. And let's talk a bit about the combination of sugar and fat, the ultimate disaster. These are fried foods, for example. Fat and carbohydrates are, of course, super tasty when combined, but also hard to digest and high in calories. And what's also in fried foods are aldehydes or acrylamide, which are actually toxic substances that form during frying, especially in old oil and so on. We know this discussion. So these are foods that the pancreas really doesn't like, that really stress the pancreas and push it to the edge of its capacity if eaten regularly. Of course, having some fries now and then isn't going to be a problem today. Again, it's the dose that makes the poison, but it gets even more intense. And who doesn't know them? The cake lovers who eat 1 or 2 pieces of cake or pastries every day. Here we have even higher sugar and fat content in baked goods with simple carbohydrates and added sugar. Then we also have trans fats. You know that trans fats are quite straight, but our cell membranes need very intertwined and branched fatty acids. And that's the big problem, that there are simply bad fatty acids in there, and they make our cell membranes rigid and age prematurely. As I already mentioned triglycerides to you, those are the classic fatty acids, and these triglycerides are also responsible for pancreatitis cases, pancreatic inflammations. 10% are due to high triglyceride levels. The triglyceride level is always measured when you check your cholesterol levels. So you don't just have cholesterol values, but you also have the true actual blood fat value, and that's the triglyceride level. Just keep an eye on it. It should be within the normal range. Some people really have very, very high levels here. The foods, and this must be said for completeness, are not solely responsible for such high triglyceride levels. There is familial hypertriglyceridemia, which means genetically high triglyceride levels. Then stress raises the level, smoking, lack of exercise, of course, being overweight, too much fat in the blood, diabetes and hypothyroidism, as well as fatty liver or kidney diseases. Earlier, I mentioned that too much sugar is a real problem for the pancreas, and I want to briefly explain what happens when you consume sugar. Blood sugar levels rise as sugar enters the bloodstream through the intestines relatively quickly. The major issue is that sugar can actively harm blood vessels, necessitating blood sugar regulation. A robust signal prompts the pancreas to release insulin, preventing excessive blood sugar levels and enabling cells to use sugar for energy. Insulin, a complex and demanding product of the pancreas, facilitates sugar entry into cells akin to a key unlocking muscle and liver cells. Excessive sugar consumption strains the pancreas, potentially causing issues. This underscores the importance of maintaining a balanced diet and making healthy lifestyle choices to support overall well-being and prevent health complications. The pancreas has to produce more and more insulin, which can become a problem because the insulin just stops working. It's no longer functional. Imagine it like someone constantly shouting in your ear with a megaphone. Eventually you go deaf and the megaphone isn't as clear, loud and distinct as it was in the first 5 minutes. The same thing happens with the cells. They become less sensitive to insulin, blood sugar levels rise, and we face the major issue of losing control over it. This leads to type 2 diabetes, and eventually insulin production is so impaired that we might need to inject insulin. Therefore, our next food category is sugary drinks. Stay away from sodas, stay away from fruit juices, and also stay away from fruit smoothies, especially the pre-made ones. You can, of course, get very, very high amounts of sugar from fruit juices, even if you press them at home from seemingly healthy fruit. So the regular fruit smoothie you make yourself probably won't be a big problem, but the pressed fruit juices or the fruit smoothies you can buy can be a big issue. Coca-Cola, pre-made iced tea cocktails, milk preparations. I remember back in elementary school, there were students who drank half a liter of chocolate milk every day. Of course, the absolute sugar bomb, that was completely normal. And be cautious with sports drinks. They often come with sporty marketing messages, but at the end of the day, they usually contain a lot of sugar. A popular product everyone knows, Granini's drink, is currently facing a major media backlash because they replaced half of their 100% fruit juice with sugar. And even with such an established juice that you might have trusted and consumed for decades, suddenly half of it is replaced with sugar. This brings us to the next topic, which is sugar substitutes, because many people naturally want to avoid sugar. But be careful here too, it can also harm the pancreas or simply have no good effect. Let's take the sweetener aspartame, which is classified by professional societies as potentially carcinogenic if consumed regularly, over 40 milligrams per day. And I know these people who consume a lot of these sweetened drinks. So let's take a closer look at what this aspartame, especially this sweetener, does to the pancreas. It disrupts the hormonal balance of the pancreas. And the big question is, how much aspartame is actually in these sugar-free drinks? So I checked the market leader, Coca-Cola, on their Swiss website, and it's listed there. And the Coca-Cola company states that in Diet Coke there are 80 milligrams of aspartame per 0.33 L can. And in Coke Zero, there are 40 milligrams of aspartame. So they have it right there on the label. The professional societies say that aspartame should not be consumed regularly and over a long period in amounts exceeding these milligrams. Most of the time, users or consumers of such light products are drinking multiple sweetened beverages or find them in other foods they consume, so they just have it on the screen. I don't want to cause panic here. You just need to know your limit and simply turn the can around and check what's actually in it. For several years now, some dietary trends have been quite popular, which, let's say, deviate a bit from the norm. For example, high-fat diets. And here's the caution about long-term use. Let's take one example, the low-carb, high-fat diet, which promotes fat as the main food, as a nutrient, or the ketogenic diet, which also promotes 60 to 75% fat, the rest being protein and very, very few carbohydrates. Of course, you can use such diets as a means to an end, but you need to be a bit careful with long-term use. Check your blood values. If they change significantly, you could develop gallstones and you could also damage your pancreas. So please don't just let yourself be influenced by American influencers and shout hooray. We've been having this discussion for decades in medicine about low-carb diets, and please take a good look at this and make an informed decision. As a doctor, I find it a good way to get someone out of their metabolic situation, but after such drastic diet measures like losing 20, 30, 40 kilos, I transition people back to a Mediterranean diet. The Mediterranean diet, in principle, has been outshining all other diets for decades, and I also warn you about large quantities. Don't eat too much. The topic of autophagy is vast and multifaceted. Fasting, in its diverse forms, 1608 and more. The crux of the matter is that an overabundance of food, fat and sugar can significantly burden the pancreas. This begs the question, what should one eat then? I happen to have a video highlighting the best foods for the pancreas. In essence, scientific research indicates that a diet abundant in vegetables and fish correlates with a lower prevalence of pancreatitis. And otherwise, it's really a fiber-rich diet. Please don't confuse fiber with carbohydrates. I often read that in the comments under the videos. So legumes, beans, lentils, and so on, chickpeas, good oils, of course, which are intertwined, branched from nuts, from avocado, from olive oil, and also some calcium-rich foods like yogurt and so on are part of the Mediterranean diet. Lots of vegetables and also fruit. The question is, what's the difference between fruit juice and fruit? Well, with fruit, you simply get the fiber along with it. And if you take a look at freshly squeezed orange juice, think about how many oranges you actually need. You're basically just squeezing out flavor and fruit sugar to get a glass of orange juice. It's pretty clear that freshly squeezed juice contains a lot of fruit sugar, which can theoretically harm the liver due to the fructose and spike your blood sugar levels. I hope you enjoyed this video. Feel free to let me know what other videos you'd like to see from me. I enjoy making these videos, and we'll see each other next time you tune in. Definitely subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any videos. And a big thank you to the channel members who support these videos. See you at the next live session. See you then.